Well, good morning. My name is Matt. I want to thank you for attending. Welcome to everyone who's here. Today, we're going to talk about how you can take back control of your work, your service work in your MSP using agile techniques, especially Kanban. We're going to give you a framework to deliver your service quickly and efficiently, making your customers happy and meeting your SLAs with the team you have today. Yeah, my name is Matt. I am with Kirchhoff Technologies. We are an MSP, actually, just like you. We are in the Vancouver, British Columbia area since about 2007, so fairly established. And I've been with the company for KTI, Kirchhoff Tech, and associated companies for about 10 years. I've done, IT projects and service, a whole variety of contexts, like running a support for a network SD-WAN product and participating in the service and triage here at KTI. So we're going to be teaching a little bit of theory, a little bit of of our experience here at KTI. And now, if you've been to a project management webinar lately, then sit tight. I'm going to introduce some basic Kanban stuff. That'll be quick, and then we'll get into new content specifically for service delivery. So a little bit more about our situation. So we at Kirchhoff Tech, we had used one of the two main methods that MSPs tend to use for handling their service work. So we use the one that I tend to call, yeah, that's our team there. So we use the one that I tend to call the free-for-all mode. Okay, you might be familiar with that. Basically, it's where there's not a whole lot of process. Technicians kind of pick up their own tickets. If you were to track the progression of a ticket from new finally to complete, it would look a little bit like that. Like it goes to in progress, goes to waiting, goes to in progress, waiting, back and forth a whole bunch of times until finally, eventually, maybe it gets to complete. So like this led to a lot of problems. We had like too many tickets started, but not finished. We like 400 tickets with only 10 technicians. It's not good. The technicians were overwhelmed because of that. Lots of work to do, but it was very, like, the more work you have to manage, the harder it is to actually tell what stuff is important, right? That was a problem. To just taking a long time to close tickets. The technicians would cherry pick the tickets they wanted to do. Things that no one wanted to do would just get ignored. Customers felt neglected. They figured out, hey, be the squeaky wheel to get the grease, and that's how they get their problem solved. And everyone's siloed, because everybody's got their own problems, right? So there's just, it kind of impacts teamwork there. So that was our problem. The other main model is called the Tetris Method. Okay, so you may have heard of that. So this is kind of like Tetris, where you figure out, like where a block can be placed in the game. You kind of jiggle it around just right until it fits, and then the lines disappear and you get more space to work. Okay, so that I call it Tetris Method because it's a little bit like what a dispatcher does when they try to fit everything precisely into the calendar. New work comes in, dispatcher finds a technician to do the work and finds a slot in that technician's calendar to put the work. Okay, ConnectWise specifically advocates for this. They call it like paint your calendar green. My life is my calendar, sort of. So they really emphasize that, but it works when it works, but it's always a lot of effort to do that. So we've got a better way. Specifically, there are three things that's wrong with the Tetris method. First of all, it's quite a lot of work, even when it goes as planned, right? Because a dispatcher, when new work comes in, they got to estimate it, like how long is this ticket going to take? They got to find the technician. They got to find a slot in the calendar for it. Okay, so it also requires the technician's calendars to be accurate and complete, because the whole thing breaks down if that's not the case. It doesn't add value necessarily, this technique, because for a lot of work at an MSP, the customer doesn't actually care what time of day it gets done. They just want it done kind of, according to the priority of that, of how urgent it is to them. Apart from that, they don't care what time of day it gets done. So putting it in the calendar doesn't actually add value that the customer appreciates. And then the third thing is that it's very, very fragile, meaning it's like a house of cards. So if one little thing changes, like a ticket takes longer than you expect, the whole thing breaks down, right? A ticket takes 2 hours instead of 1 hour. All of a sudden, the dispatcher has a whole bunch of extra work to go and move this work that got impacted by one ticket, just one ticket taking longer than expected, or a technician is unexpectedly gone, or just there's 100 things that can go not according to plan, and the whole thing breaks down and results in a lot more work, right? So we've seen, tickets can get rescheduled, 3, 4, 5 times. It's really frustrating to the customer. And it's a lot of work for the dispatcher. I once heard, a dispatcher saying they spend 2 hours a day scheduling work for 2 technicians. It's just a waste. Okay, so, Tetris is a good game, but it's not for managing your work. Now, just to be clear, some work always needs to be in the calendar. Okay, calendars are valuable for the work that needs to be coordinated with somebody, meaning you agree, hey, such and such is going to happen at a certain time. 4 p.m. I'm going to be on site, or I'm going to start this outage, or whatever. Okay, so something like that needs to be in the calendar. If it's not like that, though, it doesn't need that sort of coordination, it doesn't need to be in the calendar. So anyway, back to Kirchhoff Tech. We had all this trouble, despite that we were doing what we thought were okay practices. We used ConnectWise, right? The tickets had decent data, description, notes, the contact, budget, and whatnot. But that was not sufficient to solve the problem. So we had some software development in expertise, and software development was beginning to follow agile patterns like Kanban. So we had some experience with that. We thought, well, what if we could apply some of these techniques that we've learned from software development, Kanban, what if we could apply them to the service side? So that's what we did. We had to build all our own tooling for that too. But we found out, hey, this can actually work pretty decent for a service team. So that's what we do. So that's what we're going to teach this time. How to get the right balance of structure, right balance of flexibility to manage service at the MSP, and then stick around and I'll show you the tools that we built out and now offer to MSPs to make this all possible and fast. All right, so here we go. What is Kanban actually? So you may just have heard of it recently, but actually it goes back a long way. In fact, it goes all the way back to Toyota automobile manufacturing in the 1940s. So it's a set of ideas that have to do with efficiency, reducing waste, and representing the work visually. In fact, that's what Kanban means. Can is visual and ban means card. Right? So it has to do also with managing the work and not the workers. Sort of related to that is like pull versus push, meaning practically speaking, that's not how a dispatcher pushes work onto somebody's calendar. They set up the work for the worker to do, but the worker actually decides when they've got the capacity to do it. Okay, like I said, it's widely adopted in software development practices now, and it's becoming more and more prominent in many industries. So, like as an example, a couple of years ago here, I guess that's maybe even 4 years ago, popular Kanban application Trello, okay, got bought by Atlassian for $425 million, like big money, and that is in all industries. It's not specific to MSP or software development or anything. Another one, Asana, from last year. You may have heard of it. A project management application has Kanban boards, going public. So, and again, not specific to any particular industry. So definitely growing quite a bit, and we want to teach it to you now. It's happening because of all these benefits. Like you can see the work in progress that you have, basically stuff that you've started, and it's still your responsibility to finish, and especially allows you to limit, like once you can see it, then you can limit it. And that's what can really accelerate your team. It allows you to be more responsive. It can stop work from falling through the cracks because you can visualize it a lot better. Improves the flow of your work by identifying and addressing those whatever bottlenecks are slowing down your team. Helps you stop feeling overwhelmed. Once you get down from maybe like 30 or 40 tickets per technician, if you can get that down to like 5 or even fewer, definitely limits that overwhelmed feeling, and is a great way to communicate with your team. And we have, a Kanban just by its nature is something you can adopt with small manageable changes. You don't got to go to a huge conference, spend a week there, and then come and spend a week teaching your team how to do it. Like you're going to be here for an hour, and you can start tomorrow. Just doing the basics, just starting out visualizing your work. Okay, so it doesn't have to be a huge thing. Okay, so let's talk about the specifics of using Kanban for your service delivery. So there's three main decisions that you're going to need to make as you launch Kanban for MSP service delivery. Okay, so first of all, you need to identify the key stages in your service pipeline. Then you're going to adapt your triage method. And finally, then you're going to select your dispatch method. Those will be the decisions. And then you go and begin to launch that. So here are some typical examples of a pipeline stage that the various pipeline stages. So these are pretty good for pretty generic workflows. Like you would probably be able to think about some specific workflows you have in your company. Like for example, deploying a new computer. Okay, like that's a specific workflow. But you also have just like the general help desk workflow, right? Where probably the stages in that workflow are going to be very similar, like between your MSP and any other MSP that you might pick. So here are some generic examples. Okay, the ticket starts out its life somewhere. Generally that's the new status. Okay, that's for things is coming from the customer portal, email, phone, whatever. Okay, then ready. So this is when it's gone through the triage process. Now it's ready for an engineer to actually start working on that. You might have like in progress. You could call it started. Okay, so this one is I want to speak to this one a little bit because it's really key to understand. So that is for showing everything that engineers have started already. Like maybe they've made a time entry on it, and they could work on it if they chose to do so. Okay, so it's not necessarily for showing what the engineer is working on at this very moment, because that's actually not that important for the whole team to know about what a technician is working on at this very moment. If it is really important for you, that's fine. Like there are ways that you can track this, but probably if you have problems with like having too much work or neglected work, it doesn't come from not knowing what the technician is working on at this very moment. It comes from just having started too much work without finishing enough work. Okay. So if you can keep this like number of tickets, ideally to one, right? Only one ticket that a technician, one per technician. Okay, so if you can keep that so that every technician has only ever started one ticket that they haven't finished yet, and it's not waiting on someone else, waiting on the customer or waiting on a vendor or something like that, or scheduled for the future, then you're going to be super responsive, okay? Because all they got to do to pick up some, to be ready to take on new work is just only finish up one thing, whatever they're working on right now. It can be hard to get to just having one of those tickets. It might be more usual to having like 2 or 3. Even that would be pretty good because a lot of MSPs have, 10, 15, or 20 things that a technician has started that they haven't finished yet. So other things, waiting. Okay, so that's anything that's waiting out on somebody outside of the team. Typically the customer, could be a vendor, could be getting a part in the mail, something like that. Scheduled is for things where there's nothing more to do on this ticket right now. That the next step happens at some time we know about in the future, typically because it needs to be coordinated with somebody. You got to go on site for it, for example, or you just, you can do it remotely, but you told the customer what time you're going to do it because it's an outage or something like that. You might have a review process where technician says it's done. Somebody takes a second look at that just to confirm that it's done, or do some billing or something like that. And finally completed. That's where the ticket would, or closed or whatever you call it, and that's where it ends. So, and of course you may have other statuses, but those ones are pretty typical. Okay, so to use a Kanban board, so let me explain what we're looking at here. We make columns that map to the key stages of our service pipeline. So these are the statuses that I said, like new, ready, waiting, scheduled, started, completed, and so on. And then, yeah, so you probably already know your statuses. You can certainly just start out with the statuses that you already have in your PSA, your ConnectWise or Autotask. Then in each one, you represent the work with a card. So like if you were to do this on a whiteboard on the wall or something, you can just write on some sticky tape, painter tape or whatever, make lines to indicate the columns, and then put the work on the sticky notes, for example, and then move them from left towards the right as they progress through those stages. Of course, that would that works if you're all in the same office and your whole team can work together. But this anyway, super simple, and you get a good visualization there already. You can see where most of your work is just by seeing which columns have the most tickets. Okay, so pretty straightforward. Okay, so that was the first choice you got to make. The second choice that you're going to make is about your triage method. Okay, so you might not actually have that much to do because you might be able to keep most of your triage process. If you don't like it, you can take this opportunity to fix your triage process. But basically, what you should have is some way to do some check on the ticket. Some human looks at it and just make sure that it's a decent ticket. Things that you're going to check are, is it set to the right company, the right contact? Is it the right priority? Meaning, is this is it an emergency ticket, but it didn't come in as an emergency ticket? So change that. Make sure it's got the right SLAs, categorization, and whatnot. This is so you can identify emergency tickets so that they do interrupt the other work if it needs to be. You can make sure that it has all the obvious information. Like if someone's asking for a new user account, did they give you the name of the user and what they want, the email address and whatnot? If it doesn't have that, you kick it back before you even start it. Okay, tell the customer what extra information you need. You can set realistic budget or estimated hours as a limit for the technicians, for example, to indicate when they should stop working on this ticket and come back and review because it's kind of blowing up. It was more than we expected. So that's what you can do. This is basically what moves the tickets from the new state status to the ready status. And in the triage, in Kanban, one new step for your triage method would be to rank the ticket in the ready column. So if we go back here, so if you're coming from kind of the free-for-all mode where you didn't do any of this, then it's more structure. If you are coming from the Tetris mode where you're putting everything into the calendar, paint your calendar green and whatnot, then it's a little bit less structure, but it gives you all the same benefits without all the extra work, right? So what you do is you don't just toss stuff in a random order here in the ready column. Okay, you actually put it in the order of how you want it to get worked. Okay, most important ones at the top, because that's where technicians are going to be working on. I'll explain that more later. And less important stuff towards the bottom. Okay, so that's a new step for your triage process. This might be too much work for certain groups. Okay, so if your team is small and disciplined, then you might be able to get by without a triage role. Basically, technicians just watch the new column themselves. They pull work out of there when they're able. Okay, it can work, but typically only if the team is small, 3-4 people and pretty disciplined. Otherwise, you just end up in free-for-all mode and you don't get any of the benefits of managing your work, having limited work and so on. Okay, and also you don't necessarily need to have a dedicated triage person. That's something for larger teams, but you do need somebody to do it. So that can be a role that kind of rotates through your team daily or weekly. It's kind of like what I've had a lot of success actually in having a support person or dispatcher sort of having that role weekly, and then it rotates to somebody else. Okay, and then you don't need a dedicated person for that, but the job still gets done. So that is the second choice that you got to make. Then the third choice has to do with the dispatch method. Okay, and here is one of the key things that has to do with Kanban. So there's two choices here. You can do a technician queue. Okay, so that's like this, where basically when work comes in, it gets assigned to a technician right away. So that's part of the triage, dispatch process, is the work gets assigned to a specific technician. So everybody can kind of, each technician can kind of see ahead, like what they're working on right now, like that represented like this, and then what they have for them coming up, okay? Because everybody has their own queue of work. The alternative method is just a team, basically a single queue for the whole team. So what that effectively is like is, everybody's working on one thing right now, and they don't necessarily know what they're going to be working on next, because they don't need to care until they're ready to take on more work. When so-and-so finishes this ticket, then they will go to the front of the queue and just pull off whatever's there, claim it for themselves, and begin working on it, right? So you don't know which technician is going to take any of this work until it gets to the front of the queue, and then somebody takes it. So you probably already have seen this in action. Okay, so there are some stores where, let's think about this in terms of a checkout counter at a retail store, right? So you've probably seen both of these modes, where basically, like, when you're ready to check out, you as the shopper, you choose which checkout aisle you want to go to. Okay, so you pick it, you get in line, because there's probably a lineup, and you just wait there until it's your turn to get to the front. Okay, so that's kind of like this. More and more stores are doing something like this, though, where they make everybody just line up into a single queue, and when it's your turn to get to the front of the line, you wait until any cashier gets free, and then they direct you to the cashier that is free now, right? And so you don't know, you don't need to pick until you don't need to pick which aisle to go in until you get directed to the right one at when somebody is free, when you get to the front of the line. Okay, so this typically what you get here is that these queues, it seems longer, right? Because everybody's in the same queue, but this queue is always moving. Okay, so that's one of the benefits, is that even if the queue is long, it doesn't actually take you any longer to get to the front, because it's always moving, pretty rapidly. So there are some advantages and disadvantages to each of these. Let me explain. The technician queue is useful, and I mean, getting technicians assigned to their own list of tickets. The benefit of that is that you get uniform, you don't need to have uniform training and expertise, right? Because a dispatcher can say, okay, like this ticket came in, it's about a certain technology or a certain customer. I know which of my technicians is able to do that, direct it to that technician, okay? So you don't need to, it's okay if you have a variety of skill sets and like familiarity with all your customers. It's okay if you have that within your team, because the dispatcher can figure that out and send the right work to the right people. The team queue is better overall because it's more responsive. Basically, a new ticket will start when any technician becomes free. You don't have you don't assign that work to a single technician, and if that one technician gets bogged down with something, then their entire queue just gets just stops. That never happens, because the queue keeps moving as long as any technician is grinding through their tickets. Okay, so it's always responsive, and it's more efficient, because there's no need there's no need for the dispatcher to select the technician to do the work. Okay, so that's actually less work for the technician to do. They don't need to monitor the progress on the queue, because it's just always moving, right? They don't need to worry about the different technician queues, and if one technician gets bogged down for a while, they got to move that technician's work to somebody else. It's not really even something you got to worry about. So it's less work overall, meaning it speeds up your team. However, the uniform training and expertise not required, that is a pretty major benefit. So that's why most teams actually start out with this, despite that the team queue mode is theoretically better. If you want to get to be able to do this, you actually have to do some very careful work to train up your team and give them expertise. So it can be done, but most teams are kind of, unless they've done a lot of work to train up their team, they're more able to do this. Okay, and that's a fine choice. And actually, what you can do is you can do a hybrid mode, right? So that's where you kind of mix them. So what that looks like is that when work comes in that is more sophisticated work, it can only go to a senior engineer or somebody who's familiar with that one customer. If work like that comes in, then that work gets assigned. But if work comes in and it's just kind of basic, like anybody can do this work, whatever, then just put that into the group queue. Just so you're kind of mixing. You have queues for some of the work. Typically, that would be for your senior engineers. Work for more of the junior engineers would go to you just go to the team queue, and then kind of probably the junior engineers are working through that. If a senior engineer ever gets free, then they can go and pull work from the team queue as well. It kind of relates to support tiers, like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, right? And how work kind of can get escalated between that. So it does interact with that a little bit. If you have multiple tiers, you're kind of already doing this. If you aren't big enough yet to have the multiple tiers, then this is kind of an easy way to start with that. Okay, so what you can do is go ahead and start with a technician queue now, and as you improve the training on your team, probably the documentation for the customers, so that you don't necessarily have only like one technician who knows anything about a certain customer. Improve your documentation so the whole team can help with any customer. As you improve that sort of thing, then you can move toward the hybrid, and then finally the team mode. Okay, so how does this actually look in a Kanban board? Well, it looks like this. Now notice we've split up the work now. So we still have our columns here, but we've split up the work into what we call swim lanes. Basically, these are horizontal lanes here. And now we're grouping them by who's assigned to that work. So we would start with a lane here for tickets that aren't yet assigned to anybody. So that would be, the new stuff that's come in. So that would stay up here. And so this is specifically for the technician queue, where everybody has their own list of work. So when a work gets dispatched, you go through, you check it's a good ticket, and then you assign it and you order it. Okay, so this is kind of the dispatcher's role. So they assign a work. So maybe such and such a ticket is good for Alice here. It goes in there, goes in Alice's swim lane in the ready column, and it gets ordered, right? So because Alice is going to be working from top to bottom here. Same thing for Bob. He's got his own list of work. Now, compare that to the team queue. So this is how that would look with the team queue. We just don't have anything necessarily in Alice and Bob's swim lane for the ready tickets. The work only pops over into their swim lanes when they take it from the unassigned ready column. Then they would pull that over, or when they start that, when they're ready for new work, they pull that over to started or in progress, whatever you call it, and put it in their own swim lanes there. So let's talk about how the technicians actually work. Now that we've talked about the 3 main choices that you need to make when you're deploying this kind of work in your team, how do the technicians going to work? Okay, so like I mentioned, the work is moving from left to right. So these represent the tickets. So they're starting out on the left, they move to the right. That's actually the opposite of how the workers, how these technicians find their work. Okay, so they are going to focus their work on the right side of the board, because that's where things are closest to being complete. Like if you have a review process, or whether or not you have that, but in progress, basically their goal that they're working towards is to anything that's already started and that isn't blocked on anything, isn't scheduled for the future. Focus on that work, get that done, because it's all like the reason it's in progress is because we've already started it. So let's get that stuff finished, because the customer gets all of the value from the ticket when it's done, right? To put it another way, how much value does a customer get from a half-finished ticket? They don't get any value from a half-finished ticket. You got to get that ticket totally done, and then they get all the value of that ticket finally when it's totally done, right? So we don't want to be taking off new work when we got a whole bunch of tickets that are 50% complete. We want to take those tickets that are 50% complete, get them to 100% complete, so that we can deliver that to the customer. And then when we've got nothing else like that, nothing else that's kind of waiting on anybody else, then we can start taking off new work. And that's the key thing that is going to solve the problem of technicians having 10, 20, 30, 40 tickets that they've started and are still in their court to do. So when there is, so when they are ready to go and take off new work, they look at the ready column and they take what's at the top because the dispatcher has ordered them, right? They're not in a random order. They need to go and take what's at the top. And this is kind of similar to how they would work from the calendar. If you were doing, Tetris mode, they would do what their calendar says, because that's what gives the dispatcher the ability to prioritize the most important work sooner in the day. And so that's what replaces, that's how this is replaced in Kanban mode. The dispatcher orders those tickets. Technician knows that and takes stuff from the top. Okay, so here, just illustrated again, the tickets move from left to right, and the workers are working from the right to the left. So they start on, they don't have to worry about completed, obviously. They look for started work. So here, in this example, Alice has a couple of tickets that she's started and are still in her court to do. So she shouldn't be pulling more stuff off of ready right now. Okay, because then if she does that, then she'll have 3 tickets that she hasn't, she started and hasn't delivered any of that value to the customer yet. Okay, so she shouldn't do that. She should focus on these ones. Now, Bob doesn't have anything here in the started column. Okay, he would look at the scheduled column. Okay, well, yeah, actually, you don't need to look at the scheduled. They'll be looking at their calendar, because anything in the scheduled should have a calendar entry for it. So they'll review waiting, just make sure, okay, stuff that was waiting, did we get it? And there's nothing in there where the customer has actually answered, so it is free, like we can do that. Just make sure there's nothing in there. Okay, so nothing there. Finally, we get towards the left side of the board. Okay, now I can start taking new stuff off of the ready column. And when you get into a good groove of this, it gets really, really fast and really, really responsive. Okay, so as I mentioned, technicians are still going to be working from their calendars. In fact, if their calendar says to do something, they do that in preference to the Kanban. So they actually still work primarily from their calendar and then work from Kanban. The difference is, like compared to calendar scheduling, is that instead of their calendar being 99% scheduled, their calendar is like 10% scheduled, 20% scheduled, maybe at the most, unless it's somebody who's always on the, your on-site technician who needs to have most of their day scheduled. But anybody who's kind of working in the office, most likely they're going to have most of their calendar free now. Okay, so that actually gives them a lot of time to work through their work from the Kanban board. A little note. Different teams do different things about tickets that are waiting on, especially on customers. Some teams like to keep their technicians very focused on the work that they need to do and not have to worry about following up with customers when you're waiting on an answer for something. Okay, so some teams would assign those sorts of follow-ups to, I don't know, service manager, dispatcher, some role to do that. You can do that. Just make sure that you have a clear process so it doesn't get forgotten about. Basically, you assign that ticket to whoever is in charge of that, who's responsible for that. Other teams just say, okay, yeah, technician, if it's your ticket, you're following up with the customer, it's your responsibility to follow up, and that's fine. Okay, and then you do need to do some work to monitor the work. Okay. Making sure that things aren't getting neglected. Okay, I mean, this is the same as always. You needed to do this with any other mode. I mean, typically free-for-all mode, there was no real process around this. It would just kind of happen when the boss wanted it to happen. Calendar mode, the dispatcher would take a look at this, but typically they'd still miss stuff too, because there was just so many manual steps needed. Like, if a ticket didn't get done at a certain time of day, someone had to notice that and make sure it got scheduled into the future again, right? So it's a lot of moving parts, a lot of ways to fail. So this isn't more work, like this is still things that you had to do anyway. They're just easier. Okay, so these are some of the exceptions that a service manager or just, dispatcher should be looking for. One is if there's a due date set on the ticket, monitor that against the actual progress, meaning if it's due tomorrow, then you might need, but it hasn't been started yet, you probably need to contact the technician or make sure it gets assigned to somebody. Okay, you want to look at the hours that have been logged versus the budget or the estimated hours. Okay, so if you thought it was a 4-hour ticket and there's already 4 hours logged but it's not done, you need to be talking about that with the technicians. they can tell you whether, hey, they're 95% done, just need to do some documentation or whatever, or hey, this turned out to be way more work than we thought. Maybe we don't even want to do it anymore because I still don't see the end of it. So monitor that, because those are things that you want to be in front of, so you don't come back and all of a sudden there's 10 hours or 15 hours logged on a ticket that you thought was going to be 4 hours. Customers don't like to hear about that for sure. The long time in column. Okay, so if a ticket, we've all seen this, tickets just kind of get neglected. They just get forgotten about, and they sit there for a long time. So that's different for every column, like the length of time that something can sit there. If it's started or in progress, you don't want it to sit there for more than a day or two before moving on, or maybe going back to waiting or scheduled or whatever. Ideally, it goes to completed, but in any case, it should keep moving through there. If it's waiting for a customer, for example, then maybe it can sit there for, maybe up to 7 days. Ideally, that's probably longer than ideal anyway, but the exact number depends on what you're comfortable with. But definitely the threshold there is different for every column. You might want to look at a long time without a time entry or a note, because it tells you the truth about whether a technician is actually has forgotten about a ticket or not. If there was a time entry 10 minutes ago, we know that that's in the front of the technician's mind. If there's a time entry 7 days ago, chances are they forgot about it. Okay, so those are good things to keep in mind. You'll want to look for bottlenecks. So that's where you can go back to like the horizontal swim lanes that I showed you. And so you can see really easily if one of your technicians has, 30 different tickets in various stages compared to other technicians that have 10, there what your bottleneck is. Like too much work is going to that one technician. So if you can figure out how to distribute that work more evenly in your team, then you're going to eliminate that bottleneck, and your whole team is going to go much faster, because now that one technician isn't holding back a whole bunch of work. So a couple ways. I was already talking about some of the ways to resolve that. So when resolution, especially for bottlenecks, move work to a less busy engineer. That has to do with frequently has to do with training them or improving documentation. You need to do that. One thing you can do is swarm a ticket. That would typically be used if basically you just say, team, okay, we got to get this particular ticket fixed. It's been sitting here for a week and it is important to the customer. I guess maybe we kind of forgot about it or whatever. Everybody's working on that ticket until it's done, okay? Or until we can see that only one technician is needed to keep that moving forward. Basically say, team, this is our focus until this gets moving forward. Okay, that's called swarming it. It's an agile technique. Sometimes you just need to, again, this is for bottlenecks, sometimes suspending assignments to an engineer, so that because they have a large work in progress, they've got their own big queue of your work. That means you can't assign any new work to that technician for a while. Assign it to other people. Sometimes you just need to reprioritize the tickets, okay, especially for tickets that are sitting in the ready column. It could be, that maybe a technician has gotten a bit delayed. They haven't been getting through the work in their ready column very quickly, or maybe the whole team hasn't. If you're using the team queue, that means that maybe there was a ticket that was kind of lower priority, but the queue hasn't been moving that fast lately, and so actually this ticket it has a due date or whatever. It means you need to prioritize that higher, because it does need to get done sooner. Sometimes tickets just get neglected, especially if you're waiting on a response from a customer. Maybe you just need to remind the engineers to follow up. You can do that if you see on the ticket that it's getting neglected based on how long it's been sitting in that column, or how long it's been since a time entry or a note. Another way is to, sometimes you get these tickets that turns out that the ticket was just too big. Whether or not you knew that at the beginning, but it's like multiple days of work, and it can take a while to get through that sort of thing. So maybe you want to split it up into multiple smaller tickets, or it could be that maybe a technician has finished 80% of the work on that ticket. There's still 20% left, but that 20% is less important, or maybe that 20% can't be done until next week, for example. It's okay to split that up into 2 tickets. One is the work that's already been done. Okay, so that ticket is just complete already. it always feels good to be able to complete a ticket. Then you make a new ticket that represents the 20% of the work, and you can prioritize that like a new ticket, or you can put it into the calendar if that's what that calls for. Sometimes, again, like this is obvious, sometimes you just need to really strictly limit the scope of a ticket and say, okay, you know what, for this ticket, we are just going to do the minimum required because, you know, we're swamps or whatever. So we're just going to focus on doing the simplest thing that could possibly work. Sometimes, though, that's not appropriate, and what you need to do is increase the budget on the ticket. Okay, so those are some things that just ideas. Like none of those things is right for any particular problem. These are some solutions that can work depending on what the problem is, though. Finally, you may need to just cancel that ticket. You know, if the business case is gone for the ticket, or the client ghosted you, or maybe it's just super old. You know, it's been sitting in your system for 6 months. And you look at that ticket and you're like, definitely the customer doesn't remember about that anymore. We just never got to it. Just close it. So again, just a little reminder, if you remember one thing from today, work goes left to right on the board. As it gets closer to being completed, workers focus going right to left. And that keeps them focused on the work that's already closest to being complete so that they finish work before they start new work. Okay, but there's a little bit of a problem here. Your PSA, ConnectWise or Autotask, is no good at showing you some of this information you need. It's a lot of clicks. Like you spend a lot, and sometimes they're not very fast. So you spend a lot of time just waiting, looking at the spinning icon. They don't make it easy to monitor the bottlenecks or show you what work is getting neglected. And there's no place where you can get your whole team to see the same view of the work, okay? And you don't really want to maintain a physical board because either that's, well, I guess, just impossible, right? You can't be making sticky notes on the wall every time you get a new ticket if you just for the purpose of having a physical representation of this work. And you know, if you're like us, like a lot of us, our team is still working from home. Not everybody, but a lot of people. So we're not even in the office, so we can't even do that. We need some virtual board. Okay, so that is why we made our Kanban boards. Okay, for ConnectWise and Autotask. This kind of gives you the best of everything. So you get all of these visualizations for Kanban boards that I've been talking about. You get the visualization, you get the easy management, you can identify the bottlenecks, you can identify the neglected work. It does that for you. It points that out for you so that, you know, you as a manager, you don't have to worry about looking at all these, finding these reports, making sure that you're looking at the right reports and then communicating that to your team, okay? Because you as a service manager, you can just see it, and also your technicians are using the board, so they can see it too. You don't even have to point it out to them because they can look at it themselves. And of course, it uses the same data that you already have in your ConnectWise or in your Autotask. There's no double entry. It just comes straight out of there, right? So super easy. So let me give you an example here. This is the TopLeft Kanban boards. This is just a super basic version. So you can see here the columns. You can define any number of columns you want. You give them whatever names you want. These cards here, they map to the tickets out of the ConnectWise or Autotask. That's where the data has come from. The columns are mapped to the statuses that you already have in your PSA. Okay, so that's how we know what column to put a card in, is based on the status of the ticket and how those statuses have been mapped to the columns. Okay, you can do drag and drop. Okay, super easy, just like sticky note on the wall. Okay, pick it up and drop it into a new column. That'll go and change the ticket status right in ConnectWise or Autotask. Same thing, if you change a ticket status in Autotask or ConnectWise, then that change will feed through here, and it will, the card will actually move to a different column based on that change there. It's a really easy way to visualize this work. You can see the key ticket data right on the cards. Summary, time is how long it's been in the status, the time when the last note was made, last time entry, and so on. So all the key information is right at your fingertips. And the view is the same for everybody, right? So your whole team can log in, view this. Use a manager. You don't necessarily need to bring certain problems to your technicians' attention because they can see it themselves just as well. Let me show you another variation here. I had showed you the Swimlanes before, okay, and it's actually Kanban boards can do that too. So here's an example of a swim lane. So it's grouping it by who's assigned to the ticket. So here we have first a swim lane for tickets that aren't assigned to anybody, which means that you can be working out of the ready column here for a team. If you're using the team dispatch mode, I guess this is an example of kind of a hybrid one because we have work here in the unassigned swim lane, as well as work here for Terry and Joseph. So they've got their own queue of work. Same thing, we can see what's in progress for both of them. We can even see things that are in progress that aren't assigned to anybody, which is probably a problem. So that would be something that you would want to know about and address that. And Kanban makes that easy to view as well. This view works really good for a daily huddle. So if that's the sort of thing that you're doing, then and you should be too. That's a pretty typical agile practice, is to do a daily huddle, just 5 or 10 minutes with your team, make sure everybody's on the same page, nobody's waiting on anybody else for anything. So just be really clear about that. So that's always good practice. And you can use this sort of board, this exact view, to make that really, really fast, because everybody just kind of goes through, they report on any of their tickets that have red on them. If they don't have any tickets that have red on them, then then they don't have anything that they have to report on. Okay, easy. That actually encourages the behavior that you want there to keep the tickets up to date. So we also there are other swim lanes as well. Like you can do different grouping. You can do it by like ConnectWise board or Autotask queue. You can do it by the priority. That's also common. And a variety of other fields. So again, the SL, how Kanban can identify the problem work here for you. You can see, for example, is highlighting work where the SLA is coming due. And so you can set the threshold when this indicator turns orange, basically, if you want it, show it to me when the SLA is going to be blown in the next hour or 3 hours or 4 hours or whatever it is you want. You set that threshold and then it will show you that work. And then it can, as I mentioned, tag this in red, when we're already over budget. So that's why this is in red. Or, this one is violating the threshold that says it shouldn't be in progress for more than like maybe 2 days. This one's been here for 3 days, so it's showing it to you in red. It can also do calendar dispatch. So if you're not yet ready to adopt the whole Kanban practice, you want to continue doing the calendar dispatching, you can use Kanban for that too until you change over and use the Kanban practice for getting the work done. Or you can use this for the, if you have adopted Kanban and you're just looking at kind of the minority of the work, the things that really need to be coordinated with somebody, you're going to put that into the calendar. Kanban can do that too. You got a dialog here, you can assign somebody, change the ticket status. You can see when this member is busy, so you can find a free time in their day. A couple clicks, really easy. You can see the information. So if somebody is assigned a certain time of day, you can view that information right on the Kanban board. You even get a bit of a clue here. When it has an outline, then it means it's someone's assigned right at a certain time and day. If it's blue, it means it's out in the future. If it's green, that means it's a today assignment. So this is stuff that you got to handle today. If it's red, that means they've been assigned, but it's in the past. So that's a problem that you want to go and review. This is what ConnectWise and Autotask really, they don't give you any good visibility into the things that have been scheduled into the calendar, but are in the past, okay? It's up to you to kind of go find those. But here it's presented very, very easily in Kanban. So here's another one. This is a little different. This is not necessarily for service, but I know that people who have service teams tend to also have project teams. So it can also be really useful for project teams. Let's throw this out there. You can set the swim lanes to be the different projects. And then what you get is actually each swim lane is one project, and you can see all of the project tasks or tickets that are in that, okay? So this is a view, again, can't get this in either ConnectWise or Autotask, being able to see the details of multiple projects on one page, okay? So Kanban makes this very, very easily. It allows you to manage your whole project portfolio very easily. Another, for project people, this is an example of project boards. So these cards aren't tickets anymore. These cards represent individual projects. So if you've got, 10, 20, 30 or more projects on the go, you can't keep that all in your head anymore. And again, the PSA doesn't give you really good ways to visualize that, but you can do that on Kanban to look at your whole project pipeline and to be able to get a view into how are your individual, your top level projects progressing through your pipeline there. And it can just improve your efficiency. So like everything's right in front of you. You don't have to click so much faster. You can show the project work and service work together. Right now that's just for ConnectWise, but we are going to do that for Autotask mode. Avoid miscommunication because everyone can see the same data. You can, like there are functions to assign and unassign members. Like I mentioned, dispatch to calendar. You can create service calls. Enter time and notes. You can do that. Like this is key for technicians. So the engineers are actually going to do it, not wait till the end of the day or the end of the week, or just kind of forget about it. It's right in front of them, easy to do. You can customize a card appearance, basically set up some rules so that, yeah, you define the rules that you want, changes the appearance of the cards for whatever it is that you need in your organization. That's just for ConnectWise right now. Again, a couple of other things, sales opportunities and activities. You can view those as well in ConnectWise mode. So you wouldn't be the first person to make good use of it for in the service environment. Here's something, Judy Baker, service manager at Cital Systems in Seattle, says, absolutely have seen improvement, especially in the visibility of the work. They can have a call every morning to discuss the work from Kanban. In 3 months, they improved from 18 block tickets to 11. And 34 active tickets in their team got that down to 11, just using the same techniques that I've described to you today. We've recently introduced something called the Completed Ticket Challenge. Okay, so this has to do with all of the things that I've spoken about before, but it gives you a very very clear progression and instructions on how to do this, okay? Because this is just really the quick overview. There's still going to be, if this is all that you come to this webinar, there's still going to be some things that you have to figure out on your own. This boot camp is meant so you don't have to figure out anything on your own. You just go through the 3 weeks of this content and you just do what we say, and you'll be left with an excellent process at the end, and you will see results in cutting down the number of tickets that you have. So for 3 weeks, you get 4 guides in your inbox every week, via email content with a video. You can join our weekly community call. There will be other MSPs doing this. You can talk to them. You can ask questions. You can get feedback, and also access to the online discussion boards. Okay. This is results of a customer that went through this. So they started out, in their assigned status, they started out with 43 tickets, got that down to 25. Stalled tickets went from 34, looks like, down to 17. Okay, big improvements in 3 weeks. Okay, and you could do this too. James, fellow out of Australia, actually one of our customers, said, "Wish the Completed Ticket Challenge existed when we first adopted Kanban. It's the workflow and onboarding you need to get started." Okay, there is more information here at this page, and it's only 199 bucks. Okay, that's cheap for all this content. Well, basically, that's almost like giving it away. Okay, if you follow that, I mean, even if you only make half an improvement of what you expect, it's going to be a lot more ROI than $199. Also, I'll mention we offer a free trial for our Kanban software. It's two-week free trial by default, but if you go on the Completed Ticket Challenge, it's 199 bucks, and we bump the trial up to 4 weeks, right? So that you can get through the 3 weeks of content. Okay, so it's not just the content you get; you also get an extra 2 weeks on the trial. So if that all looks interesting, the next step is for you to get on a call with us. We'd love to show you and actually learn specifically what problems you are facing in your MSP. We can show you exactly how Kanban can help. Go to that URL. You will get to talk to us, and we can show you exactly how Kanban can help. If, as a bonus, if you sign up soon, go through the demo. We'll get you, and you subscribe by March 16th. You can have 10% off of your first year on your annual plans with that promo code SD2021. So that is 30% off of the regular monthly price. Also, if you do this by March 16th, you will get the Phoenix Project book. May have heard of that, or Making Work Visible books. Hey, we'll send you a copy of that, and because those are also terrific content to get you started in agile delivery, agile service delivery. They've been very valuable for us. We recommend them all the time. Okay, so very valuable. Now, anytime for questions and answers. Okay, so we didn't just come to throw all that out at you. Time for you to ask questions, either about the software or about any of these practices. So find the question feature in Zoom. You can also do chat if you want to, and put your questions in. Okay, so there's a couple of questions that we typically see. How can you see what is going to happen today? Okay, so that is a question that typically comes from folks who are moving from the calendar scheduling to a more Kanban style scheduling in order to save on all that huge effort that it requires to do the whole calendar dispatch process properly. Okay, so if you're doing that, you're very used to being able to see what is happening today. You got the dispatch tools in your PSA. So how does Kanban do that? Well, there's a couple of ways. Like, here's one idea. You can make a column that just represents what is happening today. So the only requirement for that is that you make a status in your PSA. You need a ticket status for today, whatever you call it, doesn't matter, but it reflects work that you believe is going to be done today. And then you would make a column in Kanban for today, map that status to it for today, and then at the end of the previous day, probably the dispatcher would be working at putting tickets into that today column. And then the technicians would be taking it out of that column, putting it into the started or in progress column or whatever once they get to that. One thing that Kanban will let you do, and this is actually kind of a recent feature we introduced not too long ago, is that you can turn on a setting where it shows you Kanban will actually add up for you all of the budget hours in a column or in a whole swim lane or even the board as a whole. So you can actually see, like if you have a member swim lane, you can see, okay, I've scheduled, it'll add this up for you. So you don't have to do it. They'll say, okay, I've put 6 tickets adding up to 8 hours of work in Bob's today column. And that might be too much, right? You can't put in a whole 8 hours of work there. They need some time for other things that come up unexpectedly or whatever, right? So you might have to say, I can put 5 to 6 hours of work in everybody's today column. Okay, and Kanban will add that up for you, and you can look at that really easily and say, okay, I put in too much, or there's actually not enough in there. Let me schedule in some more stuff for that. So Kanban makes that really, really, really easily. Some other people have asked how to handle multiple people updating a status on a ticket. Yeah, I've heard that one a few times, and typically people who ask that question what that indicates is that the tickets are too big, right? Because if you got multiple technicians working on a ticket and they're all kind of fighting over the status of that, they say, okay, like I did my part on that ticket, and now I'm done. I'm going to put that. I'd like to put that ticket to completed or like waiting or whatever, but they can't because there are other people who still have work to do on that ticket. Typically, then it just indicates that the ticket was too big. So my suggestion there would be to make a habit of splitting that ticket into multiple smaller tickets. The ideal ticket, I know that this isn't always possible, but when you can, it's good practice, is to split up all your tickets so that they can be just, excuse me, a ticket can be done by one individual in kind of one sitting, meaning they shouldn't have to expect to come back tomorrow to do it if it can be avoided. So, it's certainly not always possible, but I would consider that the ideal. And it would be more important to split them up into tickets that, so that each technician who's going to be working on that would have their own ticket for that work. That would be more value than worrying about how many times they need to sit down to work on that ticket. I would focus on like how many splitting up into multiple tickets for each individual technician who's working on that. Now, If you're doing that often, that may mean that you've been using the service module in your PSA for project work. Okay, because if you got 3, 4, 5 technicians working on a ticket, that might be a small project. Okay, and I know that some MSPs have avoided using the project module in ConnectWise or Autotask because it just doesn't give you good visualizations, and it's a lot of work sometimes to use these. But now, like I've shown you a couple of ways that Kanban can really help the project work. And so MSPs who have not used the project module in their PSAs are finding that now it's actually useful once you get Kanban. Okay, so that if you've avoided using it for kind of project-ish work, now once you get the Kanban tool, that can really open up that possibility, and you can do that management a lot better. By the way, we also have a project management module, a webinar, I mean. So I expect we'll probably do one of those later this month. So keep your eyes open for that on our announcements list and our email list. So you'll get that announcement. And if that's something that you want to start using the project management module in your PSA, then come to that webinar and learn the basics of that, because we have a simple but effective framework for project management with Kanban as well that I think you'd like to hear. Okay, well, that about wraps it up. Thank you, everyone who attended. Appreciate that. We will get the recording out. So if you had a if you had registered to come, then you will get a link to the recording, and you can send that off to your colleagues who need to hear about this. So we appreciate you signing up, and we wish you all a great day. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.